My neighbor invited me for a midnight swim during the heatwave, but she didn't bring a swimsuit. At 12:17 a.m., someone knocked 3 times on my front door. Not loudly. Not urgently. Just 3 slow knocks that somehow made my entire house feel silent. When I opened the door, my neighbor Emma stood there barefoot, her hair damp with sweat, her face flushed from the unbearable heat that had swallowed our town for nearly 2 weeks. She looked at me with tired eyes and asked if I wanted to go swimming in my backyard pool. I almost laughed. Then I noticed the small overnight bag hanging from her shoulder. It was completely flat. There was no towel sticking out. No change of clothes. No swimsuit. And when she realized I had noticed, she lowered her eyes and whispered that she hadn't come over because she wanted to swim. She had come because she didn't know where else to go. If you believe that sometimes kindness means opening your door when someone has nowhere else to knock, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when a small act of kindness might become the reason someone keeps going. My name is Daniel, and until that night, Emma had been nothing more than the woman who lived in the small blue house next to mine. We had exchanged polite greetings over the fence. She collected her mail around the same time I did. Sometimes we saw each other carrying groceries from our cars. Once, she had returned a package that had accidentally been delivered to her house. That was it. We weren't friends. We weren't close. And honestly, I had always assumed she preferred it that way. She had moved into the neighborhood 6 months earlier after what people described as a difficult divorce. I never asked questions. I believed everyone deserved the right to keep certain chapters of their life private. But that summer, something about her had changed. The heatwave had been brutal. Temperatures stayed above 40 degrees during the day, and even after midnight the air felt thick and heavy. Power outages had become common. People slept with windows open, fans running, and wet towels draped over their shoulders. My house had survived because I had installed a small backup generator years earlier. Emma's hadn't. That night, I stepped onto the porch and looked toward her house. Every window was dark. I asked her if everything was okay. She hesitated before telling me that her electricity had been disconnected earlier that evening because she was behind on her bills. Then she said something that made me stop breathing for a moment. She had spent the last 3 nights sleeping in her car because it was the only place she could find with air conditioning. But that night, her car had finally stopped working. She had walked nearly 20 minutes through the heat to reach my house. The swimming pool had simply been an excuse. She needed somewhere cool to sit. I stepped aside and told her she could come in. She immediately apologized, saying she hadn't meant to disturb me. I told her she wasn't disturbing me. The truth was, I understood more than she probably realized. 3 years earlier, I had lost my wife. A sudden illness had taken her from me faster than I could understand what was happening. Afterward, our house became strangely quiet. Friends visited for a while. Family called. Then everyone eventually returned to their normal lives. I didn't blame them. People don't know how to stay around someone else's grief forever. So I learned to live with mine. I worked. I cooked for one. I maintained the garden because my wife had loved flowers. And every night, I locked the doors and pretended the silence didn't bother me. Emma sat on the edge of the couch while I brought her a glass of cold water. She drank it slowly. Then she apologized again. I told her she didn't need to. For several minutes, neither of us said anything. The air conditioner hummed in the background. Outside, insects chirped beneath the moonlight. Eventually, Emma looked toward the backyard and smiled faintly. She remembered my pool. I asked if she still wanted to go outside. She nodded. A few minutes later, we were sitting at opposite ends of the pool with our feet in the water. Emma had borrowed an oversized t-shirt and shorts from me, which made the situation far less mysterious than the title of that night might suggest. She never actually got into the pool. She simply sat beside it, letting her feet disappear beneath the cool water. And somehow, that was enough. For the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed. She stared at the reflection of the moon on the water and told me she couldn't remember the last time she had felt safe. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't try to fix it. I just sat there. Sometimes people don't need advice. Sometimes they need someone who isn't in a hurry to leave. Emma eventually told me what had happened. Her divorce hadn't been peaceful. Her former husband had controlled nearly every part of her life. He handled the money. He controlled the accounts. He had convinced her that she couldn't survive without him. When she finally left, she took almost nothing. She found a small job at a bakery, rented the blue house, and started rebuilding her life one exhausted day at a time. But the bills had accumulated faster than her paycheck. Then the heat wave came. Then the electricity was shut off. Then her car broke down. And that night, sitting beside my pool, she finally admitted something she had been too embarrassed to tell anyone. She was considering going back to her former husband because she was scared she couldn't make it alone. I looked at her and remembered the years after losing my wife. There had been nights when I had wanted to give up too. Not because I wanted my life to end. Because I simply wanted the pain to stop. I told Emma that needing help wasn't the same as failing. She looked at me for a long time. Then she cried. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just quiet tears rolling down her cheeks while she stared at the water. I pretended not to notice until she reached for the towel beside her. That small gesture somehow broke my heart more than anything else. She had spent so long hiding her pain that even crying felt embarrassing. I told her she could stay as long as she needed. She immediately refused. She said she didn't want to become a burden. I told her that if I had learned anything after losing my wife, it was that loneliness could make people believe they were burdens when they weren't. That night, Emma slept in the guest room. The next morning, I drove her to a mechanic. Her car needed a new alternator. She couldn't afford it. So I paid for the repair. She promised she would repay me. I told her she could repay me by helping someone else someday. She didn't understand what I meant. I told her that kindness shouldn't become another debt. It should keep moving. 2 weeks passed. The heat wave continued. Emma found extra hours at the bakery. I helped her repair the fence around her house. She started bringing over leftover bread from work. I started leaving vegetables from my garden on her porch. Neither of us called it friendship. We didn't need to. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. I came home from work and found Emma sitting on my front steps. She was holding an envelope. Her face looked different. Not frightened. Not exhausted. Determined. She had received a letter from a local community center offering financial assistance for people struggling after domestic hardship. Someone at the bakery had helped her apply. She had been approved. It wasn't enough to solve everything. But it was enough to keep her from going back. She looked at me and said that if I hadn't opened my door that night, she didn't know what she would have done. I told her she would have found another way. She shook her head. Then she smiled. She said maybe. But she would always remember that someone had believed there was another way before she could believe it herself. Months passed. The heat finally broke. Autumn arrived. The neighborhood changed color. Emma's little blue house got fresh paint. Her garden began to fill with flowers. And one Saturday afternoon, I saw her standing beside her mailbox wearing a bright yellow dress. She waved. I waved back. Then she walked over with 2 cups of coffee. We sat beneath the old tree between our houses. She told me she had started taking evening classes because she wanted to become a bookkeeper. I told her I was proud of her. She smiled and said something I never forgot. She said she had once believed that surviving meant becoming strong enough not to need anyone. Now she understood that sometimes surviving meant being brave enough to knock on a door. I looked toward the blue house. Then toward mine. For years, I had thought my wife's death had turned my home into a place where memories went to die. But somehow, without replacing those memories, Emma had reminded me that a house could still become a home. Not because someone moved in. Not because loneliness disappeared. But because the door finally opened again. A year after that midnight swim, the hottest day of the following summer arrived. The temperature climbed above 40 degrees again. That evening, Emma knocked on my door. She was holding 2 towels. This time, she had brought her own swimsuit. She smiled and asked if the pool was still open after midnight. I laughed and told her it was. We sat outside later that night beneath the stars, remembering the first time she had come to my door. She admitted that she had been terrified. I admitted that I had been confused. Then we both laughed. But beneath the laughter was something deeper. Gratitude. Because neither of us knew that one difficult night would change both our lives. Emma eventually became one of my closest friends. Not because I rescued her. I didn't. She rescued herself. I had simply opened a door long enough for her to remember that she could walk through it. And maybe that's what kindness really is. It isn't always giving someone money. It isn't always solving their problems. Sometimes kindness is sitting beside someone in the dark and refusing to make them feel ashamed for being afraid. Sometimes it's a glass of cold water. Sometimes it's a borrowed towel. Sometimes it's a quiet place to sleep. And sometimes, it's simply saying, you don't have to face tonight alone. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may be quietly struggling behind closed doors. And before the story ends, I want you to leave one special comment: kindness keeps moving. Because you never know what someone is carrying behind a closed door. You never know how close someone might be to giving up. And you may never know that the smallest kindness you offer today becomes the moment they remember tomorrow. As for Emma and me, we still swim sometimes when the summer nights become unbearably hot. But we never call it a midnight swim anymore. We call it our reminder. A reminder that one desperate knock can lead to a new beginning. A reminder that broken people can heal. A reminder that loneliness doesn't have to be permanent. And most importantly, a reminder that sometimes the person standing outside your door isn't asking you to save them. They're only hoping you'll remind them that they are worth saving.